Hare Krishna, everyone. So we had to start from verse 3.12 today. Okay. So I'll share my screen in a minute. Okay. Are you all able to see my screen?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Okay. All right. Let's recite this verse. You can repeat after me. Ishtan bhogan hi wo deva
Ishtan bhogan hi vo deva
dashyante yagya bhavitaha
dashyante yagna bhavitaha
tairdattan aparadhayabhyo
tairdattan
Apradayabhyo
yo bhungte stena eva saha
yo bhunte stena eva saha
Ishtan bhogan hi wo deva
Ishtan bhogan hi vo deva
दास्यन्ते यज्ञ भावितः
dashyante yagna bhavitaha
तैर्दत्तान् अपराधेभ्यो
tairdattan apradayebhyo
यो भुङ्क्ते स्तेन एव सः
yo bhunte stena eva saha
इष्टान् भोगान् हि वो देवा
Ishtan bhogan hi vo deva
दास्यन्ते यज्ञ भावितः
dashyante yagna bhavitaha
तैर्दत्तान् अपराधेभ्यो
tairdattan apradayebhyo
यो भुङ्क्ते स्तेन एव सः
yo bhunte stena eva saha
Anyone else would like to recite?
Ishtan bhogan hi vo deva
इष्टान् भोगान् हि वो देवा
दास्यन्ते यज्ञ भाविताः
दास्यन्ते यज्ञ भावितः
तैर्दत्तान प्रदायेभ्यो
तैर्दत्तान् प्रदायभ्यो
यो भुङ्क्ते स्तेन एव सः
यो भुङ्क्ते स्तेन एव सः
इष्टान् भोगान् हि वो देवा
इष्टान् भोगान् हि वो देवा
दश्यन्ते यज्ञभावितः
दास्यन्ते यज्ञ भावितः
तैर्दत्तन् अप्रदयेभ्यो
तैर्दत्तान् प्रदायभ्यो
यो भुङ्क्ते स्तेन एव शः
यो भुङ्क्ते स्तेन एव सः
Istan bhogan hi vo deva
इष्टान्
इष्टान्
भोगान् हि वो
भोगान् हि वो
देवा
देवा
dashyante yagna bhavitaha
दास्यन्ते
दास्यन्ते
यज्ञ
यज्ञ
भावितः
tairdattan apradayabhyo
तैर्दत्तान्
तैर्दत्तान
प्रदायभ्यो
प्रदायेभ्यो
yo bhunkte stena eva shaha
यो
यो
भुङ्क्ते
भुङ्क्ते
स्तेन
स्तेन
एव
एव
सः
सः
Anyone else? Okay, let's recite the synonyms. Ishtan,
इष्टान्
इष्टान्
desired.
desired
Bhogan,
भोगान्
भोगान्
necessities of life.
necessities of life
He,
he
certainly.
certainly
Vaha,
vaha
वः
unto you.
unto
unto
you
you
Devaha,
devaha
the demigods.
the
the
demigods
demigods
Dasyante,
दास्यन्ते
dashyante
will award.
will
will
award
award
Yagya bhavitaha,
yajnabhavitaha
being satisfied by the performance of sacrifices.
being
being
satisfied by the
satisfied by the
performance of
performance of
sacrifices
sacrifices
Tai,
Tai,
they
by them.
by
by
them
by
them
them
Dattan,
dattan
things given.
things
thanksgiving
given
Apradaya,
apradaya
apradaya
without offering.
without
without
offering
offering
Ebhya,
abhya
ebhya
to these demigods.
to
to
these
these
demigods
demigods
Yaha,
yaha
yaha
he who.
he
he
who
who
Bhunkte,
bhunte
bhunte
enjoys.
enjoys
Stenaha,
tenaha
stenaha
tenaha
thief.
thief
Eva,
eva,
certainly,
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 saha,
saha,
he.
he.
Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Yesu Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. In charge of the various necessities of life, the demigods, being satisfied with the performance of yajna, sacrifice, will supply all necessities to you. But he who enjoys such gifts without offering them to the demigods in return is certainly a thief. Purport: the demigods are authorized supplying agents on behalf of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vishnu. Therefore, they must be satisfied by the performance of prescribed yajnas. In the Vedas, there are different kinds of yajnas prescribed for different kinds of demigods, but all are ultimately offered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For one who cannot understand what the personality of Godhead is, sacrifice to the demigods is recommended. According to the different material qualities of the persons concerned, different types of yajnas are recommended in the Vedas. Worship of different demigods is also on the same basis, namely according to different qualities. For example, the meat eaters are recommended to worship the goddess Kali, the ghastly form of material nature, and before the goddess, the sacrifice of animals is recommended. But for those who are in the mode of goodness, the transcendental worship of Vishnu is recommended. But ultimately, all yajnas are meant for gradual promotion to the transcendental position. For ordinary men, at least 5 yajnas, known as Panch Mahayajna, are necessary. One should know, however, that all the necessities of life that the human society requires are supplied by the demigod agents of the Lord. No one can manufacture anything. Take, for example, all the eatables of human society. These eatables include grains, fruits, vegetables, milk, sugar, etc. for the persons in the mode of goodness, and also eatables for the non-vegetarians like meats, none of which can be manufactured by men. Then again, take for example, heat, light, water, air, etc., which are all necessities of life. None of them can be manufactured by the human society. Without the Supreme Lord, there can be no profuse sunlight, moonlight, rainfall, breeze, etc., without which no one can live. Obviously, our life is dependent on supplies from the Lord. Even for our manufacturing enterprises, we require so many raw materials like metal, sulfur, mercury, manganese, and so many essentials, all of which are supplied by the agents of the Lord, with the purpose that we should make proper use of them to keep ourselves fit and healthy for the purpose of self-realization, leading to the ultimate goal of life, namely liberation from the material struggle for existence. This aim of life is attained by performance of yajnas. If we forget the purpose uh, of human life and simply take supplies from the agents of the Lord for sense gratification and become more and more entangled in material existence, which is not the purpose of creation, certainly we become thieves, and therefore we are punished by the laws of material nature. A society of thieves can never be happy because they have no aim in life. The gross materialist thieves have no ultimate goal of life. They are simply directed to sense gratification, nor do they have knowledge of how to perform yajnas. Lord Chaitanya, however, inaugurated the easiest performance of yajna, namely the Sankirtan yajna, which can be performed by anyone in the world who accepts the principles of Krishna consciousness. I'll read the translation one more time. In charge of the various necessities of life, the demigods, being satisfied by the performance of yajna, sacrifice, will supply all necessities to you. But he who enjoys such gifts without offering them to the demigods in return is certainly a thief. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesh Shunyavadi Paschat Desh Tarine. So we are discussing the 3rd chapter of the Gita. The title of the chapter is Karma Yoga. And as we know, this chapter started with a question from Arjuna, where he had asked a question that, Krishna, why are you engaging me in such a ghastly karma? If you think that, I'm sorry, there is some problem with my laptop. You can hear me, right?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Okay. Yeah, sorry, I got some weird message on my laptop. Okay. So the question from Arjuna was that why do you want to engage me in this ghastly karma if you consider intelligence to be better than activity? And there, if we remember, Krishna had started by saying that actually he compares Jnana Yoga and Karma. So the notion that Arjuna wants to renounce the word, that is under the that is considered technically as Jnana Yoga. Jnana Yoga's idea is that you renounce the active duties, you active work, and you kind of take renunciation and you spend your time in spiritual elevation. That's the idea over there. Not cultivation of knowledge and ultimately spiritual elevation. That's the idea. So you give up active duties, give up action completely. That's the idea. So Krishna starts comparing between Jnana Yoga and Karma Yoga, and then there he, although he considers Jnana Yoga as higher than Karma Yoga, but he kinds of puts it across to Arjuna as that although Jnana Yoga is higher than Karma Yoga in the ladder, but for you, Arjuna, Karma Yoga is better. It is better for you to engage in your own duties. And he actually gives the principle of Jnana Yoga in the opposite way. He says that na karmanam anarambhan naishkarmyam purushoshnute nacha sanyasanadeva siddhim samadhi gacchati. He says that actually not just by abstaining from work can one achieve freedom from reactions of work, and not just by renunciation alone can one attain perfection. So he says that actually just the externals of it is not going to help you, because ultimately what happens is, so he talks about renunciate, that if you are externally, you are trying to show that you are a renunciate and you are living like a renunciate, but in the mind you are contemplating on sense objects, then you are a pretender renunciate. And such a person is a very sinful person. That's how Krishna puts it across to Arjuna. So he is kind of telling Arjuna that, Arjuna, you are not qualified for Jnana Yoga. You are qualified for Karma Yoga. So why don't you do your duty? That's how he puts it. And there, so the point that comes is that even to do Karma Yoga, there is some kind of detachment required. It's not that, if I decide to do Karma Yoga today, I can do it. So that internal knowledge, internal wisdom has to be there. And that internal wisdom is that, I am not the body, I'm the soul. And because I'm the soul, I'm not this body, why do I need to make my body comfortable? I should work for the elevation of soul. So that's the idea of Karma Yoga. But that internal wisdom has to be there. That will ultimately lead to some detachment. So if even that is not there, then the next level that comes is in the ladder, that is down. So Jnana Yoga is higher, below that is Karma Yoga, below Karma Yoga is Karma Kand, and below Karma Kand is Vikarma. Vikarma is sinful activity, sins. So now this principle of sacrifice, although Krishna introduces it in a way that if you remember, the verse that comes is where Krishna gives the principle of sacrifice. Yagyartharth karmonanatra lokoyam karma bandhanai tadartham karma kaunteya mukta sangha samachara. He says that work done as sacrifice for Vishnu has to be performed. Otherwise, work will cause bondage. So that's how he puts it across. So he gives a principle of sacrifice over there. So although it starts with the kind of tone of Karma Yoga, but later he talks about performing sacrifices to please the demigods, so that the demigods can offer things that are valuable for us, for human beings. So there he talks about that this principle of sacrifice, yagya, is a way of coordination, cooperation between the terrestrials and the celestials. Terrestrials are the human beings, celestials are the devatas. They are celestial beings. So these celestial beings, as Srila Prabhupada also explains in the purport, that these are agents of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu. So they are acting on behalf of Vishnu. They are taking care of the universal management. So just as in a government, we have different departments. We have the Department of Recreation, we have the Department of Taxes, education, water department. There's so many. There's a police department is there. Similarly, in the universal system of management, there are also different departments, and different devatas are in charge of different departments. So there is Agni, Vayu, Surya, Indra. Indra is considered to be the king of the celestials. So he takes charge of the rain. Then there is Varuda. So these are the prominent devatas, but besides that, there are some not so prominent, not so well-known devatas, and Krishna does talk about them in the Bhagavad Gita indirectly, like Aham Vaishwanaro Bhutva. Vaishwanar is a demigod that is in charge of one of the senses. That sense, basically not exactly a sense, but he takes charge of the appetite in the body and the digestion, overall digestion. So that's how it is put in that comes in the 15th chapter. So Krishna indirectly talks about the different demigods also, different devatas also. Now this principle of sacrifice has to be understood properly. Now, even in our material day-to-day life, we see that, without sacrifice, it's not easy for us to maintain our life itself. If, for example, the mother does not sacrifice her sleep for her newborn, then the newborn cannot survive. The mother has to sacrifice her sleep and then feed the child at night also. Most of the times, we know with newborns, they don't let the parents sleep, and I have experienced it twice already with my two children. So similarly, if the father doesn't sacrifice, then the family cannot be maintained. So even the father has to sacrifice in some ways. Similarly, if whatever we have to achieve in our life, if I have to become a good learned man, I have, my internal instinct is to always try to enjoy, play around, sing, dance. But if I have to do something worthwhile in my life, then I have to sacrifice. I have to study. I have to attain qualifications to get a good job, and once I get a good job, I'll have some amount of resources through which I will be able to enjoy and also provide for my family. So anything worthwhile that we have to do in our life, we have to do some sacrifice. For example, the bodybuilders, we may look at them and at some point they might seem very attractive to us, but they only know how much they have sacrificed. They have so much diet control, they have to work so hard, at times their body pains because of the intense exercises that they do. So all of that is sacrifice. So actually, to do anything worthwhile in our life, there has to be some amount of sacrifice that is required. Even for students, it is applicable. The students have to sacrifice. If they have to study, they have to sacrifice. So this principle of sacrifice is always there. So what Krishna is talking about here is, he says, yagyarthat karmano nyatra lokoyam karma bandhane. He says that work should be done as a sacrifice to Lord Vishnu. Yagyarthat karmano nyatra. So he doesn't specially say Vishnu. If you look at the Sanskrit, it is understood that yagya ultimately is offered to Vishnu. Yagyapati is Vishnu. Any kind of yagya, it is actually indirectly or directly offered to Vishnu only. We may say that, okay, I'm offering this to some devata, so I'm doing it for some particular devata, but the mantras that are chanted for making the sacrifice for the devatas, within there are mantras for Vishnu also. So the invocation happens through the mantra for invoking Vishnu, and then the mantra for that specific devata is chanted. That's how it is done. So Krishna also makes it very clear in the Bhagavad Gita itself, in the 5th chapter, in the last verse, that he says, Bhoktaram yagya tapasam sarvalok maheshwaram. I am the enjoyer and benefactor of all the different yagyas and the sacrifices that are performed. Then again he says in the 9th chapter, aham hi sarva yagyanam bhokta cha prabhurevacha natumam abhijanati tatve nataschavanti. It is ultimately I who is the enjoyer and the benefactor of all the different yagyas. Aham hi sarva yagyanam. It is very clear. He doesn't say except this. Sarva yagyanam means all the sacrifices. So ultimately, all the yagyas are offered to Vishnu, but that connection has to be there in our consciousness. So if in our consciousness that connection is there, that every yagya is performed to please Lord Vishnu, then it is considered as bhakti. But if that connection is not there, if we are not offering it to Vishnu, indirectly it is getting offered to Vishnu, then Krishna says that, ahami sarva yagyanam bhokta cha prabhurevacha natu mam abhijanati. Those who don't know this, those who don't understand this, yet they perform yagya, tatve natas chavanti te, they fall down. Very emphatic. They fall down in the sense that it just becomes a means of give and take. So it is at the level of karma kand. So give and take means, I have to buy something from the shop, I go there, purchase it, and then I give some money to that shopkeeper, he gives me something in return. So like that, it is more like a means of, we are just giving some value to that person, and that person is giving some valuable item which we are desiring to us. That's how it is. It is just a like a mechanical mechanism. So now, even this, so we in a Vedic context, we understand that there are certain kinds of sacrifices. The most prominent kind of sacrifice that people understand in general, of course, Sankirtan Yagya, the devotees understand that, in the age of Kali Yuga, Sankirtana is the only sacrifice that is recommended, and that is actually authorized by the scriptures. All other sacrifices do not have that much value, because we know the reasons that, we don't have the proper brahmanas who can perform those kind of sacrifices. We don't have the raw materials available which are pure enough that can be offered in sacrifices. So the only yagya that is recommended, Prabhupada also points it out in his purport in this verse, that Sankirtana Yagya is inaugurated by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So he says that the materialist people, they don't have that conception, and they don't even know how to perform yagya. So therefore, Sankirtan yagya is something that can be performed by anyone at any place. So it's very easy. It is meant for the age of Kali Yuga. But if we talk about the fire sacrifice itself, even there, people don't clearly understand the efficacies. Now, how exactly it works for them. It, most people consider it as something like some orthodox rituals that are performed, which ultimately have no value. No, they say that, what kind of sacrifice are you doing? You are putting some ghee in the fire, and there is this fire burning in the belly of so many poor people. Instead of putting that ghee into that fire and wasting and turning it into ashes, why don't you feed some poor people? That will give you more tangible results. That's how they actually sometimes berate the people who wants to do some kind of sacrifices, temple worship. We know that all of us have heard it, experienced it. Even in our family, sometimes we hear it. So it's nothing new. So the efficacy of yagya, sacrifice, is not clearly understood. So actually, how it is, it is not merely a waste of material resources. For example, it is said that in Bhagavad Gita itself, it comes in the same chapter that it is by sacrifices that rain comes, and then by the rains, actually, the anna is grown. Annat bhavani bhutani. That's how it comes in the next verse, I believe, next verse or next to next verse. So Krishna makes it very clear that even the anna, the grains cannot grow without sacrifice. So actually, Prabhupada also makes a very important point that, the modern science consider that it is technology that is very important for the advancement of the civilization. It is actually ultimately technology that is providing for our sustenance. But Prabhupada makes it very clear that actually technology doesn't produce food. It is like sarga and visarga that is that comes in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So sarga is the primary creation, visarga is the secondary creation. Primary creation, sarga, is done by Vishnu, secondary creation is done by Brahma. Although Brahma is technically considered to be the creator, but it is visarga that Brahma does. He is not the primary creator, he is just a secondary creator. The ingredients for creation is supplied by Lord Vishnu. So similarly, all the necessities of the life, they cannot be produced in factories. Technology cannot produce it, actually. So what are the necessities of life? The necessities of life is food, water, air, light. These four things are very, very important, and we know it by experience that none of these things can be produced in the factory. Food is not produced in the factory. It is nature that provides us food. All these factories that we have, they are not food producing factories. They are just food processing units. That's how it is. Even if you read the labels of different food items that are available in the market, it clearly says that it is manufactured in this particular food processing facility. It is not food manufacturing. There's no manufacturing that happens. It is, they just process the food that is available, provided to them by the nature. Similarly, water cannot be provided by factories. Sunlight cannot be provided by factories. So as I was talking about, there are certain, even in our body, it is mentioned that there are certain demigods, or certain devatas that actually govern they control the functioning of those senses. For example, eyes, it is mentioned that it is ultimately sun god, Vivaswan, who is the predominating deity for eyes. So in the Vedas, it is said that even if we have eyes, we will not be able to see if there is no sunlight. And this is true, actually. Without light, if there is pitch dark, we won't be able to see in pitch dark. We need light to be able to see. So similarly, air, there is no factory we can say that, okay, there are certain things with which we can purify the air. And why do we need to purify the air in the first place? It is we who contaminate the air. And then we need some instruments to purify the air. So yes, that is true. We have certain things by which we can purify the air, but we have no means to actually produce the air. So what technology does is it just modifies the available raw materials in a way that becomes consumable by the people in general. So, and in many ways, actually, technology, it cannot provide us our necessities. It can only provide us luxuries, but in many ways, it also damages nature, so that uh, the ability of the nature to produce our necessities, that becomes damaged. We know so much pollution that is happening today. There is so much global warming that is happening. We talk about the motor car, vehicles, they are manufactured by the use of technology. But what happens is, how many, if you consider the whole world, I mean, forget about United States. I know most of the population in the United States, they are driving cars today. But consider the whole world, including the third world countries. How many people would be able to afford vehicles? There are very few, actually. If you see the percentage, why, it would be less than 20% people in the whole world. Of course, in the Western countries, there would be more number of people who would be driving cars, etc. But by the use of these vehicles, the pollution that happens, 100% of the people, including animals, they get impacted by it. So in certain ways, technology is also damaging the nature. So it is producing luxuries for a few people, for about say 20% of people, but it is actually producing pollution for 100% of the people in the world. And it is a scientific fact. So what happens is, see, the necessities of the life that are important for us to sustain our life, they are not produced by factories, they are not produced by technology. So now, how do we understand that? By sacrifices. So for example, I was talking about rain. Now we know that rains, if you just understand the mechanical working of rain, how are rains caused, and if you look at a scientific description of how rains are done. So we know that the water is evaporated from oceans, from seas, it becomes cloud, and then the clouds travel. They can actually fly in the air by whatever means, and that's also very mystical, how clouds are formed and they can travel. And then basically there is some kind of phenomena that happens, and then the cloud bursts, and then the rains come down on the ground, and that's how the rains are supplied, the water is supplied to the people in general. And it if you look at this explanation, it sounds very, very, it automatically happens. There is nothing that is required over there. Why do we need sacrifice for it? So yes, I mean, if we just from a pure plain eye, if we look at this, that this is the explanation of rainfall, that is correct, but it may not be complete. Why? Because we know that the scientists, they have, so there are many places in the world where the rainfalls are not happening. Even in America, we know that in California for so many years now, they don't get enough rains. There is an acute shortage of water in California, and there have been so many documentaries. They have been predicting that after so many years, California would be a very devastating condition because of the scarcity of water. So, and there are other places where there's so much rain that is there. They are almost all the time flooded. Even in India, there are places where there's so much rain throughout the year, and there are other places where there is no rain. Practically no rain happens over there, and there are deserts also. The deserts, we know that there is hardly any rains that happen in the deserts. So how does that happen? So if this mechanism is so simple and the scientists have been trying for decades to actually produce artificial rainfalls, so so they know the mechanism how it happens. So in fact they have tried it. There are two ways in which they have tried it. One is, we know that they try to produce artificial cloud, which is kind of, they understood that this is completely almost impossible, producing the cloud and then making the artificial rainfalls happen. But then there is another mechanism, that another mechanism is cloud seeding. Cloud seeding is basically, there are some clouds over there in the sky, it's just they are not raining, and we have seen it many times that sometimes it's just cloudy but there is no rain. So cloud seeding means they inject some chemicals. They're called as hydroscopic chemicals. And by injecting those chemicals, it produces some phenomena by which the cloud, they burst and then they give out rains. The water comes down in the earth. Now, there have been some problems with it too. And they have tried to overcome these problems, but they have kind of now given up. So we don't hear so much nowadays about this artificial rain. I have read this many times in newspapers earlier, 10 to 15, 20 years back, that their scientists are working on artificial rains. But now we don't hear it so much. We don't read it so much. Why? Because it is, they have had some very practical challenges with it. First is, they don't know how to move clouds. If the cloud is there, you can possibly go and seed the cloud, but that doesn't help, because the rain has to fall in a water body. If the cloud is on top of my house, it just rains over there, it is just going to wet the pavement outside my house. There is no real benefit that comes out of it. So that's not going to have, it's not going to work. So they can't actually move the clouds. Second is, even if the cloud moves on the top of the water body, they are not very sure whether the rain will actually fall there or not. They cannot control, because there are a lot of other factors that determine where actually the rain will fall. The wind, what is the direction of the wind, that also comes into consideration. Third is the chemicals that they use. Silver cyanide is the most used hydroscopic element, chemical, that is known to cause harmful effects. It is very well known, although the scientists would say that we don't use it in such a quantity that it would harm people, but it is very well known that silver cyanide is very, very harmful. So these are so now almost practically they have given it up. So they don't talk about it so much, artificial rains, because it is almost impossible to do it. So there have been so many companies also, and many companies have also gone bankrupt, who have invested in these kind of adventures, I would say, trying to produce rain at a large scale. You can possibly do it some in a laboratory at, you can possibly produce a glass of water with such things, but if you have to do something worthwhile, it's practically almost not possible. So now, how does actually the sacrifices work? Because it sounds a little too immaturish, that you put certain things in the fire, and then that's how the sacrifice happens, and that causes rains. So actually, one is that even if we read the Vedas, in the Rig Veda, it is described that there is a verse that comes, it says, Devanam avamo agnir parmo Vishnu tadanantar sarva devata. So Devanam, amongst all the devatas, it says avamo means the closest, the lowest is Agni. Agni is the fire god. It's not exactly lowest, it means Agni is the most accessible. And then Paramo Vishnu is the highest, he is the supreme. And then it says Tadanantar, in between them there are all the devatas, sarva devata. So actually how it works is, Agni is the vehicle, it is a vehicle for communication between the terrestrials and the celestials. So if we have to communicate with the celestials, Agni become the vehicle. It is most accessible to us. Agni is also considered to be the tongue of Vishnu. Vishnu is said that he accepts through his tongue, and Agni is that tongue. So when you put certain oblations in the fire, those oblations are actually consumed by Lord Vishnu. That's how it is understood. Now you may say that, okay, this is a little poetic exaggeration, but how it is, if we see, how even the modern technology, if you bring a person from 50 years back to today, and then they see that all this, all these things that are happening today are online. You can buy online, you can actually place an order on amazon.com, and then you pay to them electronically, and then the whatever you have ordered, it comes to right to your home. He will be baffled, and how is this actually working? Because their idea of buying things is they will have to go to a place, they will have to use currency notes, and then they have to give it to them, and then they will give you some object in return. So once my son, he was small, he wanted a dinosaur. So he has been after me that I really want this dinosaur. So then I opened amazon.com, and then I showed him, do you want this? So he liked this. So he said, how are you going to get this? I said, I'll buy it. So then he went to his he had some money that he had got, so he got it for me, and he said, put this money in your laptop and then get this dinosaur for me. Because that they can't really understand that how this is going to work. Similarly, once my daughter, she wanted some $12 from me for something. So I've been giving her a hard time to give her those $12. So, one day she came to me, and I'm, everyone is working from home nowadays. So she asked me, what are you doing? What do you keep doing on your laptop all day long? So that I told her that, I work on, I'm doing my office work, and that's how I get money. And when I get money, we could buy all these things in our home. We can also get food. So then she became intrigued, and then she said, okay, how much money do you get for one day? And I told her certain amount, and then she became so enlightened. I just need $12. Can you give it to me? Okay, let me press some buttons on your laptop, and then just give me $12, because you get so much money, you can at least give. So for her idea is that just by pressing some buttons on the laptop, I get money. So they can't understand that how this is happening actually. Similarly, if the Kali Yugi people like us, we can make a very advanced way of getting things done, advanced way of ordering things online, and working online, and still getting paid for it, and maintaining our lifestyle. Why can't it be something that can be done by the celestials? It is understood that the Swargaloka is much more affluent, it is much more advanced than their technology is much more advanced than our technology. So now how this actually works, it is it is something that the common person may not be able to understand, but it is something that actually works. This is the so Agni kinds of becomes the kind of value exchange. So something that is of value to us, we offer it in the Agni, that is accepted by devatas, and then ultimately nourishes the devatas. Krishna also says that, in the previous verses, Krishna had said that it is this system of sacrifice, it is a system of cooperation by which you satisfy the devatas, and the devatas will satisfy you. So how it happens is, when the sacrifices are performed, the devatas get nourished, and therefore we see in the scriptures, when there are descriptions in the Srimad Bhagavatam also, that when these asuras like Hiranyaksha, Hiranyakashipu, Ravana, they have to defeat the devatas. The first thing they do is they kill the Rishi Munis, the people who are in charge of performing these sacrifices. They try to stop the sacrifices, and what happens by that is the devatas become weak. When these sacrifices are stopped, their power diminishes, and that's how they're able to defeat the devatas. And that's how it is very clearly, it comes in the different scriptures. So this sacrifices is a very sophisticated way of exchanging value between the celestials and the terrestrials, and it is done through the mechanism of Agni. Now there could be other mechanisms also, like in the Kali Yuga it is said that this system is not going to work in Kali Yuga. It is kind of a broken system in Kali Yuga. Therefore there is another system, and that system is Sankirtan Yagya. So it is also kind of sacrifice, but it is performed directly for the pleasure of the Supreme Lord. And once it is, so I'm not going to quote all those verses. On Friday, if you remember, Vallabhi Gopi Mataji had quoted all those verses, that once you actually satisfy the Supreme Lord Vishnu, It is like nourishing the root of the tree. Once you pour water in the root of the tree, you don't have to go and put water on the branches of the tree, you know. So all that will happen automatically. So that is how this system works. Now here, Prabhupada says that actually, you know, if you don't do this, you know, it is actually the devatas who are giving these necessities. They are providing for these necessities to the human beings. And if the person enjoys these gifts without offering them in return to the demigods, he is certainly a thief. Prabhupada says that we live in the society of thieves, because most of the people in today's world, they are not performing sacrifices. So what happens is, you know, it is like, you know, you are taking something from someone, but you're not giving anything back to him in return. So it is kind of a cheating, you know, you are cheating that person out of it. You know, he is providing, but you're not giving anything back to that person. So this is like theft, you know, indirectly it is a sophisticated kind of theft. There is a uh, magazine, Nature magazine. It is a periodical magazine. I believe it's a monthly publication. So once there was an article from a scientist over there. This scientist was in Maryland. So he writes, so he has used uh, some calculations. So like we pay taxes to the government. So for whatever facilities are provided to us by the government. Similarly, he says that actually, if we have to, you know, give taxes to nature, you know, how much that tax would be. Provides us for our necessities, you know, light. He doesn't talk about light, by the way. He talks about mostly about air and consumed just by America. If we have to pay for it to the nature, the amount would be, so he makes the calculations there, but he says that the amount is more than the entire budget of the world for next 100 years. You know, it is just, that is the amount of things that money that we'll have to pay for it. And he doesn't include sunlight over there. He says that if we just include the sunlight, you know, just the amount of sunlight that just one state of USA, Oklahoma, gets in 1 year, you know, that would be more than the budget of the entire world. So that's how I put it. So that is the amount of value we are getting from the nature. And ultimately it is behind the nature, there are these, so there is this universal system of management that is there. And if we don't give anything in return, that is kind of theft. You know, we are cheating them out of it. So Prabhupada writes that we are actually living in the society of thieves. So therefore, Krishna is saying that, you know, if we enjoy these gifts, we are actually enjoying these. You know, there's so much sumptuous fruits that we get. Even if we talk about meat is not something that we produce. So you know, everything that is supplied by nature that we can enjoy, it is, you know, we are not giving anything back to the nature. There is also another, and this is a well-known thing. This is not something which I'm speaking, which most people would not know, but there is this scientific research that was done, scientific study. So they found that every single species in the that exists today. I'm going a little fast now. We don't have much time left, but every single species that is there, you know, they are contributing to the ecology of the world around us, except one species. And that one species is human beings. And in fact, human beings are the one species, if human species goes extinct, you know, it will be a huge favor on the planet Earth, you know, because what the human beings are doing is they are damaging the ecology. They are not contributing in any, there's no constructive contribution. It's only destructive contribution from human beings. You know, every other single entity, species of life that exist, they contribute in some or the other way. And if one of the species goes extinct, it actually damages the ecology in a lot of way, except the human species. So Prabhupada also writes about the Panch Mahayagya. So we know that there are Panchashuna, that is that is talked about in the scriptures. Panchashuna is basically the 5 kinds of inevitable sins that every householder would perform unknowingly, you know. And those sins are, we use the pestle, the grinder, the stove, the water pot, and the broom. When we use these things, inevitably there are certain life forms that are destroyed. This is mentioned in the Vedas. And because of these Panchashunas, the human beings cannot elevate themselves to the heavenly planets. And to counter that, Panch Mahayagya is mentioned. Panch Mahayagya, Prabhupada also writes here in the purport about the concept of Panch Mahayagya. So those Panch Mahayagya is the yagya for the Pitra Yagya, the Rishi Yagya, Deva Yagya. Devarin is basically for the demigods, for the ancestors. Then we have the Rishi. Rishi Rin is basically we read Vedas for it. That is how it is mentioned. And there are two other sacrifices that are mentioned in the Panch Mahayagya. That is, one is by feeding human beings, and the other is by feeding other species of life, animals, birds, etc. So these are the Panch Mahayagya that are mentioned in the scriptures, which will counter the effects of Panch Mahashuna. So, but Prabhupada says that even that is not very practical in this age. So the only thing that is practical is the Sankirtan Yagya, and that has to be performed. Prabhupada says it is very easy and it can be performed by anyone at any time. So I'll read the translation here one more time. In charge of the various necessities of life, the demigods, being satisfied by the performance of yagya, will supply all necessities to you. But he who enjoys such gifts without offering them to the demigods in return is certainly a thief. So I'll take a quick pause and see if there are any questions, comments, corrections about what I spoke.
So did you say that the Panchmahayajna are like are they part of the samskaras or something?
Panch Mahayagya, it is mentioned in the scriptures that everyone has to perform those yagyas, because to counter the effects of Panch Mahashuna, I don't think it is mentioned anywhere about they include in the sanskaras, Mataji. And I certainly didn't say it. So,
No, but like you said, Pitra Yajna, is that done like as part of the?
yeah, Pitra Red is basically the Pindadan that we do.
Yeah,
That
that's what I
is,
was thinking.
right.
Yeah.
Pindadan is kind of considered as one of the Panch Mahayagya that is to be performed.
Yeah,
Prabhupada
that is
writes
part,
it here.
but that is part of our samskaras though.
Okay, yeah. In that sense, you're meaning, okay, yeah. Okay. Mhm. Yeah, I would agree, Mataji. So sanskara in the sense that they are the duties that are given to us, right? As part of our, yeah, okay. Prabhupada writes about Panchmahashuna and Panchmahayagya at several places in different books. He talks about in Gita multiple times, in Bhagavatam also he talks about it multiple times. Yeah.
But in Kali Yuga, really, Sankirtan Yajna is the only one really possible, right?
Absolutely, yeah. It is the recommended yagya. Now, the other yagyas are also possible to do, but they may not be as effective. The effect would not be that much.
You don't have the proper brahmanas chanting the proper,
right,
intonation. And also some of the yajnas require a lot of wealth and lot of, opulence.
Opulence, purity, whatnot.
Yeah, purity, yeah.
So even deity worship, it is said that, although it was the prescribed method in the Dwapar Yuga, that was the most recommended for Dwapar Yuga. But even that is not very effective in Kali Yuga, because the kind of things that are offered to the deities, and the way it was done in elaborate fashion, that is not possible in Kali Yuga. There is a discussion that comes in the Mahabharata. There is a conversation between Bhima and Lord Hanuman. So what happens is, there is a so Bhima and all the Pandavas, when they are in the exile after they have lost the gambling match. So Bhima and Draupadi, they are in a so they go north. All of them go north towards the Himalayas, and they are on the foothills of the Himalayas. And Bhima and Draupadi, they come out to a beautiful lake, and there's like a very beautiful lotus flower, flower or some other very beautiful flower that comes flying from up the mountains, and Draupadi really likes it, and he tells Bhima that I really want this, get me more of these. And Bhima doesn't want to, he wants to fulfill the desire of Draupadi. So he actually runs, and Bhima is so powerful. He runs at a huge speed, and when he's running through the forest, so there are many animals who try to attack Bhima and try to, they think that okay, we can attack Bhima and we can eat him. Bhima is so powerful; he's just throwing the animals here and there. So many animals try to attack him, and many animals actually, in fact, die when Bhima, and they just get one stroke from Bhima. So there is almost like then it becomes like a very chaotic situation in the forest, and that time Hanuman comes over there. So Hanuman, we know, is a big monkey, and he's lying in the way of Bhima, and his tail is there on the way Bhima has to go. So it is an etiquette that we don't cross over someone. That's a Vedic etiquette. You have to ask that person to go on the side, and so that we can go. You should not go on from the top. So Bhima asks this monkey to remove the tail, and then monkey says that actually I'm so old, I can't do it. Why don't you do it? So Bhima gets really angry. He tries to lift the tail of that monkey, but he just can't even move it. And he tries his best, and then he realizes it's not an ordinary monkey. And then he realizes it's actually Hanuman. No one else could be as powerful, because I am myself so powerful. So only Hanuman could be that much powerful. So he then surrenders to Lord Hanuman, and then he says that please, don't play with me. Please tell me, please show me your real form. And then Hanuman actually shows his real form. So there is a good conversation that happens. So one of the conversation that happens over there is Bhima asks about what's going to happen in Kali Yuga, because Hanuman is said to be very, very intelligent also. He has a lot of wisdom. So over there, Hanuman talks about that how in Kali Yuga everything will deteriorate. Everything will be so impure. There will be nothing that would remain pure in the Kali Yuga. The only thing that is pure would be the name of the Lord. And he says that until there would be the name of Lord Ram chanted, I'll stay here. Once that is stopped, I won't even stay here. I'll also leave this place. So that's how this has been mentioned at several places, that in Kali Yuga everything is impure actually. Nothing is pure in Kali Yuga. Any other comments, questions, corrections?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes, Prabhuji, Hare Krishna.
So, Prabhuji, we discussed about the idea of sacrifice, but whenever we think about the notion of sacrifice, it always, we have this thing coming up in our mind that sacrifice always entails giving up something. So, on one side, when we are talking about loving devotional service of God, of course, we can endeavor to, give up something that is very dear to us in order to make that as an offering to God. So, but my question is, in that sense, why would actually God sanction something that is dear to me if it is, justified to be taken away from me? I mean, in a sense, someone might argue that the dearer the thing is to me, if I give that up, maybe I will be able to please God more. So I was just trying to understand that. Even we have so many examples, like Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur gave up uh, his love for mangoes, for example. So, and from that small, not small, that was also a big sacrifice to sacrificing the idea of sacrificing animals in the Vedic age. So, how do we understand that? Why would God want us to give up something in order to please Him?
Okay, so it is, so first of all, what is mentioned about Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati is not that he gave it up to please Krishna. He took it as an atonement, because he ate a mango before it was offered to Krishna. So he took it as a punishment on himself, that in my entire life I'm not going to touch a mango or eat a mango, whatever. So it was not an act of sacrifice. It was more in terms of atonement, or he was so you know, he was ashamed of what he had done in one way.
Right.
That they have to put it that way. Now, what it is not that Krishna asks us to, you know, give up things that are very dear to us to please him. It is we who want to show
Exactly.
to Krishna that, you know, this is so dear to me, but I love you so much. I am giving it up for you just to please. I'm making this as an offering to you, because what can we, you know, offer to Krishna? Ultimately, everything belongs to Krishna. You know, we can't
Right.
give anything to Krishna in one sense. Now, all we can offer to Krishna is our love, and Krishna is only hungry for our love. So how do we show our love to someone? You know, if you have to show your love to your mother, you tell her that, okay, this thing is very valuable for me. You know, sometimes we take some gifts for, you know, our moms, our fathers, our parents, something very valuable. So the idea is that, you know, money is very valuable for me, but I am parting from that money and I am buying something of value for you, you know, to express my love for you. So similarly, when we express our love for God, something that is very valuable for us, you know, if say, for example, I like, say you took an example of mango, I may say, okay, mango is very dear to me, but I love you so much, I can even give up mango for eating mango for you. That is my love for you. So we show on our behalf that, okay, we are giving it up for you. It is not that Krishna is telling us that, okay, you give up eating mango. And now, obviously there are certain regulative principles that are prescribed, but that is the idea there is that we don't want to commit anything sinful, and that is the idea where we give up the things that are counterproductive to the regulative principles. So like the fasting has the same principle. Food and water is very dear to us, we can't even survive. And the amount of craving that happens for food and water is the most, you know, we can't, that the to control that craving is very difficult for us. So we show to Krishna that actually we love you so much that, you know, I am going to fast for you. It is a special day, like Ram Navami is coming. It is the appearance of, you know, it is your appearance day, and I want to show you how much I love you. And for that purpose, I'm going to fast. You know, it is, you know, I want to show you. This is like that becomes like a offering from us. So that's how I have understood, Prabhuji. But if someone else has any idea, any other
Yes,
any
Prabhuji.
other
I just wanted to reframe a little bit. I exactly agree with you, Prabhu, that Krishna directly is not telling us that you know, I want you to give up something. So that is when you compared that to mother in the previous instance, that, you know, a mother makes also a lot of sacrifices for a child. So I was just wondering, as a child, we would also not really want our mother to, you know, make a lot of sacrifices on her behalf. So here I was just maybe I'll rephrase the question, that how do we actually know that, you know, these sacrifices are actually what might please Krishna? Not earlier I said that is it actually pleasing Krishna? Krishna does not want it. I mean, Krishna is not demanding it, but we from our sides try to make that offering.
I mean, I would. So first is how do we know if Krishna is accepting it or he's actually getting pleased or not? So okay, now there are again two things. One is, you know, that is how what is recommended by the acharyas, and we have to have faith on the acharyas that, okay, if the acharyas have told us this, so there is this. So the concept of Ekadashi fasting, for example, it is talked about very elaborately in the Hari Bhakti Vilas. Hari Bhakti Vilas is written by Jiva Goswami, if I'm not wrong. So there he talks about how the Ekadashi fasting has to be observed and what are the effects. And then there are other scriptures also where the merits of performing Ekadashi fasts are given. You know, there are other Puranas where, you know, there is a discussion happening between Krishna and Arjuna is asking, please tell me the glories of fasting on this day. You might have read that. You know, so there are statements that are given, and where Krishna himself says that one who fasts on this particular day, you know, he is so dear to me, and this is what is going to happen for him. So there are statements of scriptures that are there. There are statements of acharyas that are there. Similarly, in the Uddhav Gita, it is mentioned that this is also a limb of bhakti. Fasting is, so there in the Bhagavad Gita, the what all needs to be done as part of bhakti is not very clearly mentioned, because Bhagavad Gita is more like an emergency scripture where Krishna is speaking in an emergency. There it is being told on a battlefield, and there is not much time to talk over there. But Uddhav Gita, Krishna is at leisure, and Uddhava is asking these questions to Krishna. So Krishna speaks elaborately, and then he talks about what are the things that should be done as part of bhakti. So there he talks about a lot of things. He also talks about cleaning my temple. He talks about performing dramas on the special days that are related to my karma and my appearance, and then he talks about fasting. Fasting also, he says that is also something that he could do, and I will accept it as an offering from you. So there are only certain things that we can do from our side. So we have to, it is kind of a way for us to express our love for the Supreme Lord. And it is an authentic way, which is recommended by the Shastras and even by the Acharyas. So I would accept it in that way. Now, besides that, how Krishna is, I don't know if Krishna is getting pleased or not, but I know that my Guru is getting pleased by it. So, so we know that if Guru is pleased, Krishna is also pleased. So that's how I would take it, I think.
Yes, definitely, Prabhuji. I mean, talking about fasting on Ekadashi or offering something to Krishna, those are all there in the Vedic texts. So definitely, even Sankirtan Yagya, that's also a sacrifice, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has directly said that. So these are definitely there. But many people talk about other sacrifices. I was just wondering.
Can you give an example?
Like
giving up things, okay, like
giving up things, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so basically I have seen some so I have heard these from the Varkari Sampradaya. So Varkari Sampradaya is also, it is said that it is like a sub branch of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, because the Varkaris are the descendants of Maharashtra. Who's that? Namdev, right? Namdev or Tukaram. So they were also kind of indirectly initiated or directly initiated by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu only. So Varkari Sampradaya, I have heard from devotees over there that every year they would give up one thing which is very dear to them. Like, for example, one of my friend, he was a very serious Varkari follower. So, and they also have the same things, that they also have kirtans and so many things that they do. So on one particular year, he gave up eating, I don't know exactly what, but he gave up something. Then he gave up tea. Then he gave up wearing certain things. So there they say that one of the teachings that is given in their tradition is that, something that you love to do, to show your love to Krishna. They also worship Krishna. Of course, Krishna is in the form of Vitthal. Vitthal is also Krishna only. So that is one of the way to express their love for Vitthal. So giving up something to show that, because I love you so much and I am making this as an offering to you. Now, offerings can be of many kinds. You can offer a flower, you can offer a food item. You can also make an offering by saying that, okay, this is something that I value so much. This is something that I like so much, but I am going to refrain from it for the rest of my life. And this is my offering to you. This is how I'm expressing my love for you. So we have to accept, we have to understand it in that way, Prabhu, that it is like an offering that we are making.
To show our love that,
right.
nothing is greater than my love.
Yeah, sometimes you might have told Mataji, I can give my life for you, So of course you don't do it, but that's how you try to express, right? So
Prabhuji, we also give up something for Kartik. Generally for Kartik,
yeah.
we give up eating some vegetable or fruit just for the month of Kartik,
Very true, Mataji.
Well, I think for renouncing of something, we all, because we love that thing, so we remember all the time that, okay, and that way you can remember the God, that yes, I gave up this because I want to please the God.
Yeah, very true. Actually, that's true, Mataji. So that's what is said for fasting also, that whenever that urge to eat comes, we have to remember, why am I fasting? And that will remind us of Krishna. So that is another way of remembering Krishna, that, okay, I'm fasting to please Krishna, and that's where I have to control. And the other idea is we have to take our consciousness away from that thing. Like food is something that is very, very, so we think about food so much. Okay, now it's time, I should go and eat something. So idea is that we takes away so much energy, so much time of our day. So we'll stop, we'll not focus on eating, and whatever time is available to us, we are going to focus on chanting. We will focus on Krishna some way or the other by doing some other service, or by chanting, or by kirtan, or by reading shastras. So that is also the idea.
Thank you, Mataji. Thank you, Prabhuji.
See, ultimately, what happens is when we have to give up our life, and then when we are giving up our life, we have to be able to remember Krishna. So this is also like a preparation for the death, that at the time of death I should be able to remember. So it shouldn't happen that something that is I like so much, I'm remembering that at the time of death. So idea is that give up these things
Teach
now
us
itself.
teach us to detach.
Yeah, that's true, Mataji.
Yes, and at that time, you have to give up everything else
Yeah.
that is dear to me. Right, Prabhuji?
Mrityu sarva haraschaham. That's how Krishna puts it in the 11th, the 10th chapter. As death, I take away utterly everything. Nothing remains with us. Not even this body will remain. So that time, what would be our consciousness? We don't know. So we are preparing our consciousness in one way or the other to be able to remember Krishna.
Very true. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Okay, I think we are over time now, so let's offer obeisances to all the Vaishnavas. Vancha kalpatarubhyasya kripa sindhyubheva cha patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Ananta koti Vaishnava Vaishnava Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Ganpati Govind.
Prabhuji ki jai.
Prabhupada ki jai.